Welcome to the D.E.A.D podcast, where I discuss all things spooky and weird. I'm Desi, and today I'll be talking about The Devil, Part 2. Let's get started. Hey everyone, how is everyone doing tonight? I hope y'all are doing good. Tonight I am drinking something new, and it is another one of those little canned mixed drinks, and it is Seagram's Escapes Jamaican Me Happy. And it's really good. And I have it in my skull glass. So I will definitely post a picture of that. My spooky shirt I am wearing tonight is my Friday the 13th Jason Voorhees one that has 4 of his faces on the front. And so I will definitely post a picture of that as well. Tonight's episode is The Devil Part 2, like I mentioned. And these stories are actually a recommendation from my very sweet friend Joe over at the Tales, Trails, and Taverns podcast. Definitely go check them out. It's a great podcast. But he told me about these places that are supposedly said to be touched by the devil himself. So let's get started. The first one that I will be talking about is the Devil's Tramping Ground. The Devil's Tramping Ground is a camping spot located in a forest near the Harper's Crossroads area in Bear Creek, North Carolina. It has been the subject of persistent local legends and lore, which frequently allege that the devil tramps and haunts a barren circle of ground in which nothing is supposed to grow. It has frequently been noted on lists of unusual places. Legends about the ring are well known in local communities. These include the disappearance of objects left within the ring overnight, dogs yipping and howling, not wanting to go near it, and strange events occurring to those who spend the night within its boundaries. It has been alleged that nothing has grown within the 40-foot ring for 100 years. Supposedly, it is where the devil walks in circles on certain nights, thinking of ways to bring his evil into this world. John William Hardin of Greensboro, North Carolina, journalist, newspaper editor, author, and advisor to North Carolina governors and textile executives, had this to say of the Devil's Tramping Ground. Chatham natives say that the devil goes there to walk in circles, as he thinks up new means of causing trouble for humanity. There, sometimes during the dark of night, the majesty of the underworld of evil silently tramps around the bare circle, thinking, plotting, and planning against good in behalf of wrong. In addition to the devil-centered explanation, numerous other theories have arisen to account for this strange North Carolina landmark. Some people believe the spot was an ancient meeting place for local Native American tribes who made the bare circle with their ceremonial dances. Another explanation links the area to the legend of the lost colony of Roanoke Island. This story holds that the tramping ground was an area called Croton, named for the fallen tribal chief buried there after a battle, and the word Croatian carved in the tree on Roanoke Island referred to this battle site. In both of these stories, the tribal gods purportedly preserved the barren circle as a memorial to their followers' loyalty. Scientific explanations for the characteristics of the Devil's Tramping Ground have been offered as well. Some say horses used in the operations of an old molasses mill created the spot with their constant circular treading. However, comparisons to the paths formed at similar mills do not support this theory. Possibly, the most plausible explanation came from the soil studies once conducted by the North Carolina Department of Agriculture. Samples of earth taken from the barren path proved to be sterile due to an extremely high salt content. The remains of natural salt licks were also found in the area. The second place I'll be talking about is called Devil's Hop Yard State Park. Brimming with shady trees, peaceful paths, and magnificent cascades, Devil's Hop Yard State Park is no doubt one of the most beautiful places in Connecticut. It is also one of the most haunted places in Connecticut. It is sometimes hard to believe that one of the most ominous of all Connecticut legends is associated with the tranquil area. However, the eerie tales surrounding the stunning state park in East Haddam are undeniable and utterly creepy. Devil's Hop Yard State Park spans 860 acres in the lovely town of East Haddam. It is considered one of the most beautiful places in Connecticut. People flock to this natural area to camp, hike, and picnic. Despite its idyllic atmosphere, Devil's Hop Yard State Park has a spooky history, earning it a reputation as one of the most haunted places in Connecticut. In the mid-1600s, Puritan settlers established communities throughout Connecticut. These early inhabitants were especially wary of the devil and believed he could be hiding in even the most peaceful of places. In fact, you'll see evidence of their beliefs throughout the state. There are about 34 places around Connecticut that reference the Prince of Darkness in some way. A search for the origin of the name Devil's Hop Yard reveals a wide variety of different stories. None of them are verifiable, and all are likely to be more fiction than fact. One of the most popular of these stories is about a man named Dibble, who had a garden for growing hops used in the brewing of beer. It seems that through usage, Dibble's Hop Yard became Devil's Hop Yard. There are records of several farmers having hop yards in the area, but there is no mention of a landowner named Dibble. However, Dibble might have been a tenant. Another tale focuses on the potholes near the falls, which are some of the finest examples of pothole stone formations in this section of the country. Perfectly cylindrical, they range from inches to several feet in diameter and depth. These potholes were formed by stones moved downstream by the current and trapped in an eddy where the stone was spun around and around, wearing a depression in the rock. When the rock wore itself down, another would catch in the same hole to enlarge it. We know this now, but in the early settlers, the potholes were a great mystery that they tried to explain with references to the supernatural. They thought that the devil had passed by the falls, accidentally getting his tail wet. This made him so mad, he burned holes in the stones with his hooves as he bounded away. Another story reports that a lone traveler, while walking through the hop yard one night, saw some weird, shapeless forms leaping from the hedges and trees near the falls. Later, these phantoms accosted the terrified man, who then beat a hasty retreat to the nearest tavern, where he related his experience to anyone who would listen. Some say that the traveler had spent too much time at the tavern before he took his rambling through the hop yard. The most widely circulated legend tells of the many times Satan has been seen sitting on a huge boulder at the top of Chapman's Falls, playing his violin, while the evil witches of Haddam stirred a hell broth for a charm of powerful trouble in the cauldron-like potholes formed in the rocks below. This legend is likely a result of the Puritans attempting to make sense of their surroundings. Native Americans often performed sacred rituals along the falls, and that may have frightened the new arrivals. Even though Puritan settlements are long gone, spooky energy remains to this day. Dozens of visitors have reported feeling ominous energy around this park. Some have even heard demonic voices and maniacal laughter. You may also see mysterious orbs floating around the falls. Okay, now I'm going to be telling about a supposed encounter at the Devil's Tramping Ground. Firstly, this story is as true as I can remember it, and not at all fiction, though I have wondered before if my teenage mind embellished some of the details out of immense fright. Alas, make of it as you will. Any theories would also be appreciated. It was the fall of 2009, and at the time, I was 16 years old. I live in the central part of North Carolina. Nowadays, the cities are loaded with things to do for the Halloween season, but back then, the best form of entertainment I could come up with was to visit the Devil's Tramping Ground with a few friends. The Devil's Tramping Ground is a local legend. It sits right outside of Siler City, North Carolina, about an hour away from where I live. And I had just gotten my license, so why not? For those of you unfamiliar with the locale or its legend, the Devil's Tramping Ground is a perfect circular spot of dead soil in the middle of the woods. Despite the greenery around it, nothing grows in that circle. The legend says that if you drop or leave anything in the circle, it is moved and or disappears by morning, as the devil supposedly comes here to plot his evil doings against humanity late at night, pacing in a circle as he thinks. That's the gist, but feel free to do a little research if you're interested. It's a decent read. Siler City is a sticks and barns town with long barren roads that seemingly translate to "Don't stop until you get the hell out of here." It was on one such road where I began to feel uneasy. Rural areas always have that heavy Twilight Zone energy, and the road we were on, conveniently titled Devil's Tramping Ground Road, was completely lacking streetlights. The only thing illuminating the overworked asphalt was the fading yellow headlights of my 2002 Mercury Cougar and the useless glow of a crescent moon. In those dim lights, we began to see splattered graffiti on the road leading up to the location. Creepy things I didn't expect, but never really would have understood the impact of it until I saw them. In white paint, the road was decorated with crude warnings. The one that I remember the most was, quote, "The devil lives here," end quote, and a huge white cross in front of an opening in the forest. I parked on the side of the road. The grounds was immediately not as creepy as I expected. It was not too deep into the woods. In fact, the clearing could be made out from the road, not as menacing as I had imagined. Maybe it was the empty beer cans or red Solo cups lying all around. Obviously people partied there. Or maybe it was the jokes my friends and I started making almost immediately that calmed my nerves. But it was 2 something in the morning We decided to catch Lucifer right on his hour, and I remember feeling less on edge than I was on the road. My flashlight would get eaten through the trees if I moved it upwards, so I focused its beam on the soil, truly more interested in finding signs of the paranormal than my friends were. It was 4 of us total. 2 of my friends went back to the car after a while. It was cold and there was not much to see. I stayed back with a buddy of mine. I brought a Ziploc with me, along with a pocket Bible, a rosary in my pocket, just in case, and a stuffed rabbit that one of my best friends had given me. Before leaving, I scooped up some dirt and added it to the Ziploc. I found the prospect of dead soil so interesting and figured that maybe studying under proper light compared to other soil would give me a better idea of what happened here. Alien radiation? Climate change? Sulfur? Maybe the devil was just busy that night. In between jokes and complaining about the cold, we heard someone walking in the depth of the woods. This wasn't a mistaken sound. This wasn't an, I think someone is walking in the woods. This was a definite sound and a definite feeling. This was deep behind the brush, between the trees, and these footsteps were heavy and unashamed of being heard. This was the first time I noticed no crickets were in these woods. There was no sound other than us and these steps. I was even more unwilling to lift my little flashlight, which was tucked under my armpit and pointed towards my soil sample. My eyes didn't need adjusting, and so we stood there as I made out the shape of something in these woods. It was dark, but I could see it. It was tall, but not disgustingly tall. It was human-shaped. It stood on 2 feet. It would walk and stop, then walk and then stop. Towards us, I think. We were petrified. Neither my friend or I moved. I don't even think we breathed. I was so overcome with fear that I felt numb, but a little tremble ran through my entire body. We just stared. Later, we would discuss how we both wondered if it had seen us, and talk about how we didn't want to move in case it hadn't. At this time, we would also discuss the smell. It was an awful, putrid scent, burning feces and rotting eggs and rotten meat. I grew up Catholic, hence the Bible and rosary, and have always been told that smell means the devil is around. That didn't help my case then. Even typing that now, I'm slightly trembling. This thing stayed toying with us among the sticks of the forest. I say sticks because at the time, very little greenery was alive. I was certain, at one point, that it saw me. I had that sixth sense feeling I was being stared at right back, and suddenly, I had a feeling of overwhelming, unbearable despair. I realized then that my friend had been clutching the back collar of my shirt. I think I was so paralyzed with fear that I had ceased to feel anything but that numbness. I wasn't even cold anymore, but when I felt my friend's hand, I dropped everything in my arms and stood up, then hauled ass back to the car, not running, just very hurried. I was sure my friend was behind me, but between us, and in all honesty, I didn't even think about it at the time. I was just ready to go. I was so ready to go, in fact, that I missed the clear path completely and took off in between trees and brush, heading towards the yellow glow of the headlights. It wasn't an incredibly long trek, like I said before. The road was right there, but it felt awful and long to me, and it was enough for those tiny branches to leave scrapes and even some cuts down my hands, cheeks, and neck. This whole ordeal can't have lasted too long. When I got back to the car, the keys were already in the ignition. The other two friends had the heat on, and they both asked me what happened. The friend who stayed behind with me got in the passenger seat soon after, and we took off. Our other friends, the ones who had been in the car, pointed out that our eyes were swollen and bright red. I think we had been crying, or at least it looked like we had been. I looked in the rearview mirror and my pupils were abnormally dilated. My pupils were puffy and tender and red. Keep in mind, this could all have some form of explanation. Maybe the fear made us cry without us knowing, and maybe the darkness combined with our nervous reactions enlarged our pupils, but it was still very odd. I realized long after that I left my Bible, my stuffed rabbit, and my Ziploc bag of dirt in the circle. I considered going back the next day in broad daylight, but I haven't been back there since. I still wonder and worry about who has my stuff. That brings me to the end of this episode. Thanks for listening to the D.E.A.D podcast. Please follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at the D.E.A.D podcast. Also, feel free to send in your stories, episode suggestions, or feedback at the deadpodcast1@gmail.com, or send me a DM on Instagram. If you enjoyed this show, please rate and review the podcast on whatever platform you are listening on, and be sure to come back next week for my next episode.